Um, we have couple of our Board of Education members who were able to join us this evening. I see Mr. Johnston over there in his comfortable chair, I think in the basement. So thanks for joining us, Mr. Johnston. I believe Pam DeFord was able to join us as well. I think she's on this call. Dan too, I believe, was also gonna join us. Mr. Bianco is gonna be in and out. I believe he was in the car, but he was gonna join us as well. And have a couple of my cabinet members that are gonna help me give the presentation. So again, thanks for tuning in. We've tried diligently to keep not only the community, but also our employees in the know in terms of what we're thinking and you know, what that plan looks like and what September is going to look like. I think I've shared a couple of times, my wife is an educator, my sister's an educator. I learn a tremendous amount from them and what goes on in their districts. And they give me advice, sometimes solicited, sometimes unsolicited, on you know, what I should be doing in Kings Park. But we want to make sure that we have our employees with the most current information, and that's why I wanted to make sure to hold this meeting as quickly as we could, and alongside the community meetings as well, so that everybody's getting the same information. I have a presentation that I'm going to walk us through, and just give me a minute. I got to pull it up. Okay. If you see that on the screen, give me a thumbs up. All right, that's a good sign. It's a little over an hour. What I'll try to do is it's very similar to the presentation we made for the community, but I'm going to try to tweak it a little bit so it's a little bit more you know, employee focused. The interesting part about the group that's on this call is we vary greatly in two ways. And what I mean by that is some of us never left work, whereas some of us are going to be re-entering for the first time in 5 months when we get to September. And it's a very different experience for both groups of employees. So you know, we have some super brave individuals who worked all through the pandemic, whether you were a custodian or one of our bus drivers or driver assistants who were delivering meals to children, or our mechanics who were keeping our buses up and running. You know, some, and folks like myself who worked through the entire pandemic. And then we have our instructional staff who might be in a much different place, who are you know, potentially still very anxious about coming back to work. So, and I'll try to touch on both sides of that equation as we go through the presentation. So again, you know, thanks for joining. The last couple of months have been crazy. And then, you know, we got this wacky storm last week, and some of us have been without power or internet for several days as well. And we all share one common want, which is we all desperately want life to go back to normal. And we want to know when that's going to happen. And we want that to happen as soon as we can. The super unsettling aspect of today is that we don't know where the end is. So unlike if you lost your power last week, you know, it's uncomfortable, but it's going to come on eventually. If you lost your internet and your Wi-Fi, your kids are pretty bumming because they live on that. but it's going to come back. We don't really know when this COVID thing is going to go away and when life is going to come back to normal. And that's super unsettling for all of us. So we've had this truly great committee of 90 some odd people from every aspect of our organization, plus parents and students. We had over 40 teachers on this committee, and nurses and support staff, you name it. And we planned every aspect of reopening that we could think of, focusing in on instruction, on education, and of course, mental health. And we had 11 different work groups. Again, 40 some odd teachers. Our biggest group, obviously, is that instructional program, which broke down into 4 separate subcommittees. But we had, custodians and groundsmen and you name it. We got input from every group of employee that we have, including the transportation department. Very, very important. Our mechanics in terms of cleaning our buses and things of that nature. And we truly have been rethinking every single aspect of school, which hurts your brain on some days, because school is a lot more complicated than sometimes we might think. And we'll find out in particular why lunch tends to be way more complicated than maybe we would hope it would be in COVID land. But I just want you to know that we haven't done this in isolation either, that myself and the board and members of administration have been connected with a state reentry committee, a Suffolk County reentry committee, the New York State School Boards Association, the New York State Council of School Superintendents, Western Suffolk Superintendents, which is 18 school districts in our area, the curriculum and instruction group that Dr. Cardesano has been meeting with as recently as today, and our Huntington-Smithtown Superintendent Cluster, which ranges from Smithtown to Cold Spring Harbor. We've all been communicating and collaborating. The thing that's kind of looming in the background is our financial situation. So we know that the governor could still potentially hit us with mid-year reductions at any point in time. So we are spending budget codes that don't exist right now in terms of PPE and Lexan barriers and additional staffing, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But we're also trying to be really, really super careful while also trying to address the needs of our staff and the community, because we know at some point the governor may come back and say, well, I'm going to take 10% of your state aid. And that would be $1 million that we wouldn't have. So it's truly a wacky time. We're still hoping that federal stimulus money comes to be. It stalled in the Senate, and it is very much just stalled right now. So more to come on that, hopefully. And one of the super frustrating things is that it took the state forever to get their act together and give us some guidance that would be helpful. We didn't actually get any guidance from the state until mid-July. Until that point, the Safe Pride Committee was actually using the guidance from states like Maryland, Connecticut, and Massachusetts to inform where we thought the state might go. But once we got that guidance from the state, we had basically 2 weeks to put our plan on our website by July 31st. The governor said that he would make the final decision on schools, and he did on the 7th, which was both good and super confusing for the community, because the governor said schools can open. Great. And I think many of our parents thought, awesome, our kids are going back to school full time. But that's not exactly true because we still need to follow CDC and New York State guidelines, which is very important. So the plan is on the website. It's about 66 pages long. If you have trouble sleeping one night, it'll definitely help you get to bed. It is super chock full of information, but it may need to evolve over time as things change, as guidance changes, as things happen that we didn't consider. And we'll definitely update our employees and the community should that plan need to change and morph. Now, the super important thing on my level is this is a screenshot of what the plan submission looks like to the state of New York. You don't have to read it in detail, but I wanted you to know that there are 91 required assurances that I was mandated to check yes on that range from assuring the state that we will not have any flammable hand sanitizer on buses to maintaining social distancing in an educational setting. 14 different mandated areas, and those 14 mandated areas became the 14 major parts in our plan. And these assurances started each paragraph in that plan so that we made sure we had everything in there that needed to be in there. If we look a little bit at infection rate, the governor has talked about 5% and 9%, that if the infection rate is below 5%, we can open schools. If the infection rate goes above 9%, we'll close schools again. I'm not really sure where he got those percents from, but we have been far below 5%. The state has actually been revolving around 1%. We were 0.93 in New York on Sunday. Suffolk has been right around 1%. We were as high as 1.5% 2 weeks after the 4th of July. And you can probably figure out why that was 2 weeks after the 4th of July. Kings Park been relatively stable, but I do encourage you to follow the figures in Newsday. We continue to add a case or two every couple days. It's not huge, but it's definitely still lurking, and we still need to make good choices as a community. And speaking of good choices, this is a phrase that I use a lot, the board uses a lot. It takes a village. Our goal is to get the kids back in school and safely. And if we want that to happen, and I emphasize this with you, I emphasize it with the community, we all need to continue to make good choices, because it's going to be that first case, whether it's a student or whether it's an employee, that shuts us down, whether it's for a day or 2 weeks. We need to be smart and we need to make good choices. We know that there were people, hopefully not anybody on this meeting, who might have made some poor choices on the 4th of July. And we know this because cases spiked 2 weeks after the 4th of July. A lot of backyard barbecues, things of that nature. Everybody got out and celebrated. And, we just need to be really, really mindful and super focused on being vigilant with our families, with our friends, and everything that we do between. And, I think this helps us a little bit. We don't work with college age students that have a much higher infection rate. Many of us work with K-4 students. Some of us work with students ages 10 to 19. The younger students, we have found through research, and here's a neat study that was published in a bunch of places from South Korea, which basically said that the youngest students are least likely to get the virus, if they do get the virus, they're least likely to be really sick, and they're least likely to transmit the virus. So, you know, our little ones are going to have the most issues with masks and things like that. But just remember that your little ones are the least, they're the least problem. Many of our day camps, New Beginnings included, who's right downstairs, does not require masks for our younger children. And they've had 0 cases of COVID. Scope, which has run childcare since April in Suffolk County for healthcare workers and first responders, has had 0 cases of COVID. Why? Because they're just being smart. They're practicing the 3 W's. And it's mostly younger kids who are involved in these programs. Many successes. We also have our extended year special ed program, which has been running in Kings Park this summer. I'm super thankful that Dr. Kobe Rooney and our special ed department was able to pull off in-person teaching this summer. And we've really had no issues. And it's been a mini school year. We've had busing for those students. You know, it's really been going very smoothly. But we know we have a vulnerable population. We have a high-risk population. We have students and we have employees who might be at higher risk. If you have not already done so, make sure that you reach out to Mr. Craig's office, and he will address whatever specific questions or concerns you might have in terms of accommodations. Okay, so looking at students, we're going to have some students who are either vulnerable or not comfortable coming back to school with our anticipated model. And these students and these parents are in the process of requesting remote-only instruction for the coming school year. Our principals are collecting them, and within the next week, we should know what we're able to provide for some of those students, or hopefully all of those students. In some cases, we may have 20, 25 requests on a grade level, and we may be able to offer a remote section for those students. We may only have 10 students on a grade level. We may need to get a little creative. So we should know the answer to that in the next week or so. And that was why we held all the parent presentations this week, so that we could continue to emphasize that we need those requests by Friday. We have some students that will be in person 5 days a week. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute, but some of our special class students, our ENL students that are still learning the language and may be beginners, although there's a new term for that, and our BOCES career and technical students. BOCES is planning on running a 5-day-a-week in-person schedule, and we want to make sure that those students can get to BOCES and come back to Kings Park High School. So those students will be with us 5 days a week at the high school, and then we'll transport them home at the end of each day. 5 big challenges that all schools are going to struggle with. Believe it or not, lunch, number one by far. And many of our parents don't quite understand this, but it's not as easy as the kids just eating in their classroom. They don't understand that our teachers typically, especially on the elementary level, will take their kids to lunch and then they get their lunch. And the kids are typically in the cafeteria, and they're typically cafeteria aides that are watching those students. Unfortunately, that 12-foot lunch table in the cafeteria can now not seat 8 to 12 students, Now that 12-foot table can only sit 3 students, spaced 6 feet apart, because they're eating lunch. And when they're eating lunch, they're not wearing a mask. So they need 6 feet in all directions. So what that looks like is an elementary lunchroom is, about a third of the way full compared to what it used to be. So we now need overflow places to put kids to eat lunch. So in some cases, we'll be looking at part of the gymnasium. And in some cases, we may need some classrooms to put students in, which means we need additional supervisions folks in the form of lunch aides to help us do that. And that adds to our supervisory budget and was a little unanticipated, but we need to make that happen. The classroom becomes a challenge for many, many reasons that we could think of, but most of our classrooms are 900 square feet. Our classrooms at RJO are smaller, and that creates some issues for us. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Specials, PE, music, art. The recommendation from the state is if students are involved in aerobic activity, deep breathing, things of that nature, 12 feet of distancing is needed. If they're singing, if they're playing certain instruments where saliva might be involved. My daughter plays the clarinet and the oboe. We got to think about that. In many cases, the specials will be coming to the classrooms rather than the other way around, because we want students to move around less in the school environment. We want the students to stay put, and we may bring adults to them. Transportation becomes a little challenging, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute, but we also need to watch our spacing on the bus, and that's really important. We also got to make sure that we feed students, both in school and those that may be home on remote instruction, just like we did this past spring. So 5 big challenges every district is struggling with. So I came up with the color-coded model. We all want to be on green. We're hoping to get there someday. We probably need a vaccine, or we need the pandemic to just go away before we get there. Yellow is in-person school, but with some significant restrictions. Orange is hybrid, where students are not in every day. And red would be if we had a spike in cases or a confirmed case and we needed to close a school for a period of time. We would need to flip to completely remote instruction like we did this past spring. But as we'll explain in a little bit, a much more robust system that we designed. So I'll go through this quick. We surveyed our parents to get a little bit more information. What we found out is our parents were actually much more supportive of getting the kids into school than you might have thought. And we actually end up with two sets of folks who are very passionate about their feelings. One set of folks really, really wants the kids to be in yellow in person every day. Maybe because they just want their kid out of the house and with us. But certainly education is obviously important, and they want their kid in school every day. And then you have somewhere between 7 and maybe 10% of the population who is super concerned and really may end up asking for a full remote option because they're worried about their child's safety and health, or the safety and health of somebody else in the family. And one group is significantly larger than the other group, but we hear from both groups regularly. we did ask parents, if you had to choose one model, which one would it be? Almost 2/3 of our parents were in favor of yellow in person. Let's get them all back in school tomorrow, and they'd be perfectly happy with that. 92% of our parents indicated that they would provide face coverings for their child. What this told us is that most and maybe all of our students on that first day will probably come to school with a mask. Some may not. We will have a supply of masks waiting at each school, as well as for each one of our bus drivers, should we have children who do not have a mask, who should. And we'll make sure that everyone, before they get on the bus and before they step foot in school, has a mask. And we know, especially if we have kids, and I do, that childcare and balancing work is going to be a challenge. You know what I do for a living? I'm never home. My wife's a school psychologist. We have 2 kids. What are we doing with them? I have no idea. I have spent way more time trying to figure out what we're doing with our school district kids. One of these days, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with my own kids. We do know that 97% of our parents have indicated that they do have the ability to perform health screenings in the home. I'll get to that in a little bit more detail in a minute, but what that basically means is that parents have a thermometer at home that they can take their child's temperature with. If you're interested in actually accessing the plan or the Q&A, just go to the website, go to Departments, Health and Safety, and then September 2020 reentry plans. Everything you need to know is right there. There's a super lengthy Q&A document that I actually updated this morning. This should be August 12th. It's got well over 300 questions answered in it. A lot of the questions repeat at this point. But if you do have any specific questions and you want to know the answer, you can absolutely send the question through the SurveyMonkey. I'll see it and I can add it to the Q&A. You can also just call my office or email me, and I'd be happy to answer your question as well. So communication mostly geared towards family members in the community, but I wanted to talk a little bit about employee, what I'm going to call smart use of social media. So I need you to help us out and help yourself out a little bit. Many of us have social media accounts. Many of us have members of the community on our social media accounts. So please be mindful that many of our families are anxious about returning to school in September. And we have received a number of phone calls over the summer regarding employees' photos that are posted to social media. Not a great idea to post you and a bunch of your guy friends or girlfriends without masks with drinks in your hands. Parents that's freaking the parents out. Because that's their teacher, that's their bus driver, that's their school worker, maybe their administrator, and they want to make sure that they're sending their kid back to school in an environment that's going to be safe. So I need you to be super mindful of what you're posting to social media over the coming weeks. And I also want to ask our employees, please do not post any photos of the classrooms. Please let us do that. There have been some model rooms that we want to share with the community, but there was recently a picture of a school that came back to me through a parent email, and that room was probably not how it's going to be set up in September. And I then had to explain that, but that was already shared with hundreds of people. So if you could use the model classroom sharing to the school district, I'd really, really appreciate it. Our teachers should know that we're working on getting our students their own email accounts in grades 5 to 12. I think this will greatly help with communication with our students so that our students don't need to go through their parents to email us. So technology and Dr. Deere are in the process of putting those student email accounts together for us. Lots of questions with health and safety. We will have a health screening tool that all employees will need to complete daily. And we'll get a little bit more information to you as we get closer to September. It's going to be on an app called My School Badge. And essentially, you'll open up the app as you would any other app. You're going to answer 3 or 4 questions, yes or no, and then you're going to hit submit. One of the questions is, do you have a temperature over 100.0? One of them is, have you exhibited any of these symptoms in the last X number of days? It's very straightforward. The health screening tool is actually right in the appendix of our plan. But that will be a requirement for employees to submit daily. And our students are also going to submit that daily. It's not 100% foolproof. We know that, for example, not less than 50% of kids who have COVID show a temperature. But it's the best plan that school districts can come up with at this point. We're going with an app that's been tested. It's not brand new. It's a company that's very well known in the area and established. So that'll bring a little bit more structure to the health screening. The governor threw us a curveball last Friday regarding testing and contact tracing. We will not be performing COVID testing in our schools. We are not a testing site. We just won't be doing that unless the governor directs us that we absolutely have to, but it's our understanding that testing is not a function of what we're going to be doing, but we will be, I'm going to call it teaming up with some of our local walk-in centers. There are 3 or 4 walk-in centers that are free, and you can go get COVID tested. They will be shared with employees and parents. So if we do have a situation where we think somebody might have been exposed, whether it's in school or out of school, we can give that individual a short list of places where they can go and get tested and get those results shortly. The school will play a role in contact tracing. We just found this out last Friday from the governor as well. But we will be hiring an additional aide in each school who will work with our school's nurse and help out with a variety of tasks in the nurse's office. But this will be another set of hands that'll help us with some contact tracing if and when we need to do that. We just received some updated Suffolk County Department of Health exposure and quarantine protocols today. It's very straightforward. We'll share that with staff. Hopefully you won't need to use it, but if we do have an issue, it's pretty spelled out what we need to do. We were obviously all be wearing masks when we return to work. Many of us are working right now and are wearing masks when we can't social distance. Obviously, if you're in a place in your school, like working in your classroom and you're the only person in the room, obviously, be smart. You can take your face covering off and it's not a big deal. But we want to make sure that we're covered when we're in hallways and when we're in places where we can't adequately social distance. We also have a large stockpile of PPE. Mr. Craig's going to go into a little bit more detail on that in a little bit in terms of what we have on hand. We have some face shields and clear masks for adults who might want them and students who may need for students who may need a clear mask in order to do, say, speech sessions with a teacher. Sharing of supplies. So we're going to want to plan out so that students share as little as possible. It's going to be more difficult in the younger grades, and I'm going to ask that we rethink our supply lists a little bit, particularly on the elementary level, to address this particular issue. We're also going to ask our principals to follow up on grade levels and make sure that we get our supply lists updated. I don't think we can just use the supply list we had last year. I think we got to make sure that that we double check and rework that classroom supply list a little bit. We have purchased and we're in the process of installing Lexan barriers. It's Lexan is the fire code plexiglass. So unfortunately, schools are always more complicated than you want them to be. You can't just go out and buy plexiglass and put dividers up. It's got to be a special material called Lexan that meets fire code. We'll show you some examples of what that looks like in the classroom in a little bit, but we have gone ahead and purchased a significant amount of Lexan. Again, the medically vulnerable, if you think you might need some accommodations, make sure to reach out to Mr. Craig. And we are encouraging students to bring water bottles because we know that refilling water bottles is substantially safer than drinking from the water fountain. All right, I believe we have Mr. Craig with us. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mr. Craig so he can explain some PPE equipment that we have available.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Dr. Egan said, the PPE will play a critical role as we return to our schools for both staff and students. So, the picture you see here on the screen will be somewhat of a care package as you arrive back to school. So, although not as pleasant as we want, certainly very necessary. So, as you can see there, we have ordered a number of masks. We have cloth masks that will be available for our staff as well as students. So we're going to give 2 cloth masks to each of our employees and have those available for our students as well. In addition, we will have disposable masks. Those will be for our transportation, our bus drivers, which they've been using throughout summer school. In addition, we'll have a package of disposable masks for our teachers as well. This way, in case a student the mask is not fitting properly, or perhaps they're wearing a bandana at the secondary level, the teacher will then have a disposable mask to give to the student just to ensure the safety of everyone in the classroom. In addition, hand sanitizer, you'll see. Each of our classrooms does have a hand sanitizer station in the classroom, but in addition, you'll have another bottle to have at your desk as well. Our clerical staff will have them as well, just to make sure there's plenty of hand sanitizer for everyone. In addition, each of the teachers and the aides in the classroom will get a bottle of disinfectant and towels. We're certainly not expecting those teachers and aides to clean the classroom, but as you know, our custodial staff, our day staff is maybe 3 to 4 custodial staff per building. So they're really doing their deep cleaning and disinfecting in the evening after the students leave. But in case you just want to clean up an area, we also have the EPA approved wipes as well. That each of our teachers will get with the aides as well in the classrooms. This way, in case you want to wipe down a smartboard or a door handle, you do have something available to you in the classroom. As well, everyone will be given latex gloves also. Certainly, if you're comfortable using gloves, you can use them. These will be given to all our employees and our bus drivers as well, just to give that added layer of safety as you return to school. Some additional PPE that we have. So these are items that you may ask for, certainly from your principal or your supervisor. So we do have a supply of N95 masks, which are in short supply. They're mostly for our nursing staff who will be working with our students who may be sick, but we do have a supply of N95s that could be available to staff members upon request. We also have the KN95s, which are comparable, but maybe not as good. We do have those clear face shields that Dr. Egan had mentioned earlier. So those staff members who may request or need some additional protection to feel safe in the classroom, we do have those available that we can provide. We have medical gowns that are really for our nursing staff, but available for any staff member who may request that accommodation. And as Dr. Egan noted earlier, we're in the process of crafting those Lexan shields, which are going to be for really the classrooms, our K-3 classrooms, to ensure that safety with the social distancing. So our maintenance staff is really working hard to prepare those, but we're also looking to create Lexan shields in clerical areas for those who may need it, just to provide that additional, layer of protection for those who may want it or need it. Moving on to facilities, this is a multifaceted component. This is also very important, looking at our facilities and our buildings as we return to school. So as you may or may not know, we get a lot of requests to use our buildings all the time, our fields as well. So as we return to school, we will not be approving most of these applications. We really want the buildings to be safe as we return for our students and staff. So we're really going to limit the amount of people that are going to be in our building. So there won't be things like your Boy Scouts or PTA events. We're going to really limit the use of our buildings as we return back to school in September. In addition, visitors will be kept to a bare minimum. We really want to keep our buildings safe and clean. So visitors, for the most part, will be discouraged, but certainly if someone needs to come to the building, they can do it upon request, and they will be also going through a health screening prior to coming into the building, having to wear a mask, really following all the policies and procedures that we have in place. Classroom ventilation. This is really something our maintenance staff that they engage in every summer. So there are two components of this. A lot of our ventilation was upgraded through a bond project. Some examples are we upgraded our HVAC units at Parkview Elementary School, our auditorium, gymnasium, media center at the high school, all increased ventilation as part of our bond project. But in addition, as part of our regular maintenance, we do change out filters throughout the summer. So they have been replaced and upgraded with a higher level filtration system to really get the best ventilation as we return to school for our staff and students. Classrooms and bathrooms will be disinfected every evening. So that will take place, and we have these fogging machines that we have purchased. They are being used currently in transportation for our buses. We're also using them for our classrooms. So that will be that deep clean that Dr. Egan mentioned on Wednesdays and Saturday mornings. The fogging machine basically works that it's a disinfectant that's put in the fogging machine. You put it in the classroom, it basically disinfects the entire room from counter space to the ceilings to the windows. It puts a layer of disinfectant throughout the entire classroom for that deep clean that we will need to remain safe as we go through the school year. High traffic areas during the school day will be taken care of, as best we can with our daytime custodians. Areas like your cafeteria, some of the hallways will be cleaned and wiped down throughout the school day. And then certainly, as Dr. Egan mentioned earlier, putting in place a plan with our building principals to really not share supplies as much as possible in the school day. Continued on facilities, avoiding locker room usage. So certainly with our physical education, we're going to kind of re-look at that program, not having students use locker rooms. We just feel that's not a good area to be using as we come back into the school year. And the cafeteria spacing, as Dr. Egan mentioned earlier, a very critical piece and decision driver looking at our model are really how do we get students in these cafeterias safely at 3 per table. So we will be looking at cafeteria space, looking at classrooms really to ensure students they have their masks off, just to make sure all students are properly spaced. In addition, we have purchased the outdoor tables for our middle school and high school. So they're going to be creating, Mr. Huntsman and Ms. Moreno, some outdoor eating space as well, to really try to space it out students so they can safely enjoy their lunchtime as well. Also worth noting, as we ordered our PPE, we've ordered a good deal of signage as well. So our signage will really reinforce the good hygiene habits, what we're asking our students to do, being socially distant, wearing a mask, washing your hands. So we have large signs that will be placed in our hallways by our cafeterias. We've ordered stand-up hands-free sanitizers as well. So, I envision as you walk into buildings, you'll see signs reinforcing good hygiene habits. Going in the cafeteria, similar to like when you're on a cruise, putting your hands out, sanitizing your hands. Those will be available throughout the school as well. In addition, directional signs for traffic at the secondary level. We've ordered them for the building principals, and some signs for being socially distant, which our building principals will utilize to make sure everyone is safe as well. Square footage. So this is looking at our classroom space. This, certainly looking at CDC guidelines, the highest risk was, full side in-person classes. Students are not properly spaced. If you've been following the news, you look at the high school in Georgia, and those hallways where students are crowded together, certainly not what we're looking to do. So, we've taken the time to really look at our classrooms and square footage and our buildings. For the most part, most of our classrooms are 30 by 30 square footage. RJO, being an older building, has our smallest classrooms. So at RGO, it's about 600 to 750 square feet, with class sizes more towards 24, whereas at the elementary schools or K3 schools, a bit smaller. So that was really a driving decision in the plan to bring back K3 right now full-time, and we have some example photos of the classrooms to show you as well. So as part of that classroom in K3, as I noted, we do have these smaller classes at Parkview and Forest Salonga, ranging from 18 to 22 students. We do have 900 square foot of usable space. We're also going to be utilizing the Lexan that we spoke about. So right now, as we speak, our maintenance staff, they've basically assembled an assembly line to create Lexan barriers to really assist in creating the proper distance and spacing and safety for our K3 students. So there you have it. These are two model classrooms at Parkville Elementary School. So on your left, you have a first grade classroom, and there you see that those Lexan barriers are right at the front of the desk. So this example, the photo that was taken, we have 2 rows of 7, one row of 6, and the one row you can't see is a row of 2. We did leave space by the entryway of the door to the teacher to access their storage area, and also for students to get to the bathroom, which is utilized in the classroom as well. So you see here that they're 6 foot through the width, and then they have the Lexan to protect them from each other back to back. So that is how we're getting our K3 students in. On your right-hand side, you see a kindergarten classroom. So there are kind of 2 models there. If we went with the table model, you'd have a Lexan glass right in the middle with 2 students at the table. Or towards the back, you see it would be a student desk, once again, like first grade with the Lexan. So properly spacing them with that plastic barrier as well, and making that room able to fit the students and properly space them to meet both CDC and DOH guidelines.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Craig. And just one addition, these Lexan barriers look like they're not clear. We haven't taken the protective coating off yet because the custodians were still cleaning. They are very much clear. They won't be cloudy as you see there. And I just wanted to publicly thank Mr. Craig and Ed Damala, Tom Stevenson, members of our maintenance staff who have been working on the rooms, our head custodians. They've really tried to rethink and make sure that we order everything that our employees would need in order to re-enter the classrooms in September. And I want to thank you for that. And just to add a little bit more on here, we've been, I don't want to say hammered, but we've been getting hammered with a lot of questions regarding, alternatives for space, and might there be a way to get grades 4 and 5 back more days a week? We have researched a lot of options. We've run into a bunch of dead ends. One being St. Joe's in terms of usable space. Portable classrooms really are not an option for us because we would have needed to start that process probably last fall. We had, and this was floating around on social media, we had a bunch of families who said, well, Holy Family and Comac just closed. How come we can't use their rooms? It's actually not legal. Our schools need to be within the school district boundaries. And because Holy Family's in Comac, we can't do that. So that becomes somewhat of a simple legal answer. And again, our goal is to create low-risk environments for kids and staff, not high-risk environments for kids and staff. The uncomfortable part is those 4th and 5th graders whose parents are, either scrambling for childcare or super annoyed with the school district that they have to pay for childcare. But it all comes down to risk level and wanting to make sure that we keep that risk level as low as possible and not high. To a certain extent, separating kids while they're eating by 6 feet is going to help us with food allergies. So I'm not too worried about issues with that. We have put some Lexan in our school lunch lines for point of sale and things of that nature. We've done a lot of work with our transportation department. We had Carrie and Steve Lee and Monica who had joined us in some of that planning. All individuals on the bus will be wearing a mask at all times. Parents are going to be encouraged to drive their children to school, which will thin our buses out a little bit. We're thinking of maybe doing a survey next week so that we can actually get the names of kids who are going to be driven to school. That might help us with our bus routes a little bit. So we're looking into that for next week. Children are going to be seated 1 child per seat on the bus. They'll be seated from back to front on the way to school, and then they'll unload from front to back when they get there. Siblings should sit together because that'll free up another seat on the bus, and the siblings might not appreciate sitting together, but that'll certainly help us with seating. The interesting thing that I never thought about, but is actually in the 91 assurances that I had to ensure the state, is that we will not have sanitizer on our buses. It's flammable. I wanted to put that here in the presentation because we did have a couple of parents who were envisioning that the kids would be hitting the sanitizing station on the way on the bus, which might not have been so obvious to them. But again, sanitizer combustible, can't be on the bus. We have posted for additional driver assistance. If you know anyone who might be looking for a job, we are hiring driver assistants. We're also hiring lunch aides right now. Spread the word on that. And our maintenance department and our drivers have done a great job this summer. And again, the plan is that we're gonna fog disinfect those buses at the end of each shift, AM and PM. And we'll simply wipe down some high traffic areas, those handrails and things like that after each run. I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Cardesano, my newly dubbed deputy superintendent, to speak to our school schedules.
Thank you, Dr. Egan. Good evening, everyone. So I'd like to take an opportunity now to explain our instructional plan. We had 4 subgroups that took a look at instructional planning, teaching and learning. One group focused on elementary, K to 6. The other group was 7 through 12 for secondary. We had a subgroup that looked at special education, and English language learners, and we had a fourth subgroup that focused on special areas such as music and art and physical education. So the state required us to come up with models for each scenario. That included a hybrid, a totally remote, and a in-person model, and we fulfilled that obligation. And I'll walk you through what that looks like at each level. So for September, coming into the year, we are going to operate on a hybrid model. So you'll see in just a minute, it's an A-B model that we chose, and that will be for all students K-12. And then after September 21st, or on September 21st, our K-3 students will be in full-time. As Dr. Egan had mentioned, we are still taking a look at grades 4 and 5 and examining every type of possibility if we could look at an option for those students to be in person as well. So we're still analyzing that and looking at that every single day.
And I just wanted to add, I don't know if our parents fully appreciate this, but we did communicate this with them on July 27th. Our goal was to give parents a good 5 weeks to plan for a hybrid opening. I do know of one district on the South Shore that does not plan on telling their community exactly which model they're going to be going with until August 20th, next week. We did want to get that hybrid model good possibility out there as soon as possible, and that's why we did share that very early with parents.
So taking a look at our hybrid model, it's an A-B model, and there's other variations. We looked at 4 different models, and this is the one that the committee felt that would be the most successful for our students and staff. Students would be assigned to a cohort or a group or a cohort, and a B group. If you take a look at the A group, you can see that they would be in school for in-person instruction on Monday. They would be learning remotely on Tuesday. On Wednesday would be a planning and PD day for our teachers, also support for students. Most of our students, not all, most are remote on that day, with the exception of some students with disabilities and some of our English language learners. Those that are entering and emerging would be in 5 days a week. Also, as mentioned earlier, our students who attend Western Suffolk BOCES, they would be in school 5 days a week. So what occurs in addition on Wednesday? There'll be class meetings for our K-5 students, and this will be with both cohorts because this model, students could be in one cohort and not necessarily interact with their classmates in the B cohort. So on Wednesdays, they would be a class meeting with the teacher live, and they would get a chance to do some SEL work and exchange some communications between all of the students. We are going to endeavor to do a lot of our RTI and AIS support on Wednesday. We can't do all of it, but we're going to try to do a lot of it on Wednesday. And that would reduce the amount of pullouts on the other days for students. SEL and mental health support staff all be available for students on Wednesday. For our middle school and high school, there'll be office hours for students to get extra help. We're looking at that by department. This way students can have some contact time with their teacher if they need assistance. We will follow the 4-day cycle for the middle school and high school. This was looked at thoroughly by our subgroup and the 7-12 groupings, and they came up with the day 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, 4-4 pattern. And that gave the most equity so students can see their teachers and teachers could see their students in odd and even days and the 1 out of 4. The next slide will explain that. And this was sent out to parents. It's also copied in our plan. If you take a look, you can see the first day of school, and that's a 4-day week. And it's worth noting on 4-day weeks, Wednesday will not be a remote day. Wednesday will be an instructional day. So for the first week, you can see everyone is hybrid. Students in A cohort are in on the first day on the 8th. On B, on the 9th, you would see it's a B cohort day. And again, day 1, followed by day 2, an A-B model. This A-B model was looked at because it reduced the gap between when students would see their teacher. Some schools are looking at an AA-BB model, but that really creates a lot of space and time for when a student's back in the building and when they actually see their teacher in person. So the thought was to try to get the students back in more frequently and not have such a gap in time. You could see that that pattern repeats itself on the 21st. K-3 students, that would be Fort Salonga and Parkview, would be in every day from this point forward. The following week, we get back into a 4-day week with the holiday, and you could see Wednesday is not a remote day there. It is an in-person instruction day. We looked at the calendar. Mondays were a lot of days where school was closed, and that's why we chose to do that for remote days on Wednesdays. For 4-day weeks would be in person. If we were to go to a fully remote schedule or the red model, we take a look at that, and you can see it's a much more structured model than what we had in the past. We took a look at kindergarten and first grade and being mindful of what's developmentally appropriate with regard to screen time and attention spans of students. We know kindergarten students are building up practice, they're building up routines, so we modified that schedule with some teacher input. All students receive reading, writing, and math lessons every single day at the elementary level. They will be assigned to small groups by their teachers, and the teachers will provide that schedule to parents so they'll know the frequency of those small group instruction. We'll work to schedule RTI and support days for students where they're not in small group. Again, trying to minimize the amount of screen time. And this again is on a fully remote model. If we were shut down, hopefully we will not be in a red model. RJO is similar pattern, 45-minute classes, 20 minutes of large group instruction or synchronous live teaching, 25 minutes of independent practice or asynchronous. Teachers have the flexibility. They can add additional synchronous time if needed. We anticipate that would happen clearly at the kindergarten, first grade level as students start to get into those routines. But that will be a teacher's discretion to add to that over time. Here's the schedule for kindergarten and first grade for Parkview and Fort Salonga. You can see there are more breaks built in here because that's developmentally appropriate for these students. We begin with a morning meeting, or at Parkview, it's Parkview TV. Again, trying to create that in-person experience remotely for kids. We followed the times of the school, and that was done deliberately because we may be asked to go into a remote red model very quickly. So we want to provide this to parents so they know if we needed to switch quickly into a red or fully remote model, what does the schedule look like? And go back to an in-person if we were allowed to. So keeping in mind that these schedules and these models have to be fluid, we follow the time that the building typically operates on for teaching and learning. You can see the breaks are built in. You can see the foundations of reading, shared reading, math lesson, a writing lesson, and special areas such as physical education, music, and art will be on the schedule. And that will really clarify that these are not totally optional. We want the kids to engage in special areas. Here's the second and third grade schedule. You can see the modifications, not as many breaks built in. Morning meeting, Parkview TV, math lessons, again, reading, RTI if needed, a writing lesson, specials, and related services. Social studies and science will address those through the ELA, through reading and writing lessons. Fourth grade, very similar. Here it would be the morning meeting to begin, some SEL, some mindfulness activities, some announcements. We'll use RJO TV, a reading lesson, a writing lesson, a math lesson, and then specials will rotate for each teacher's class. Fifth grade, very similar, just be mindful that in fifth grade we do have 2 teacher teams. So we have 1 teacher teaching ELA and social studies, and their colleague would handle the math and the science. Same setup, morning meeting, specials here would begin earlier, and then resource room, E&L, or office hours, lunch, and then reading lessons in the afternoon. On the secondary, what does the secondary schedule look like, middle school and high school? We would follow the regular bell schedule, and that's for the reason of being able to move back and forth on a moment's notice between being in person or hybrid and having to go fully remote. We take a look at the 80-minute classes and recognizing that's a lot of time to be directed on screen. So we broke that down into 50 minutes, 25 minutes of synchronous instruction, and that could be via a Google Meet, and 25 minutes asynchronous. That could be a pre-recorded video. It could be a Screencastify could be utilized there, and then 30 minutes of independent practice. The 30 minutes could take place right there, online or offline. The student can finish that work independently and take an additional break and get ready for their next class. We're promoting, the synchronous instruction as much as possible, as well as the guided and independent, and really that flipped learning model. Seminar and A block would remain exactly as they are in days 2 and 4 for students in grades 7 through 12, and in grade 6 on days 1 and 3. Same concept in place: extra help, related services, check in with the teachers, that connectedness, and some mental health activities by grade level. We could also do virtual assemblies, take care of some more SEL, and be available to support the students the best we can. Teaching and learning overall, a Google platform remains our learning management system. We know that there's been some professional development classes offered, 2 sets of those for this month in beginning level and advanced level. You will notice tomorrow in my learning plan, I put out a professional development survey to get some more feedback from faculty of additional areas, a lot on instructional technology that you want to learn more about, and we'll work to provide that. We'll provide that on some of those remote days on Wednesdays, and we'll certainly incorporate that into our offerings in our monthly in service. And I'll send an email out to the faculty more than likely tomorrow with more details on that. During remote or e-learning, the students will complete those asynchronous learning activities. Those, again, will be short videos. It's the Screencastify, it's the flipped classroom model. I mentioned this point already. For the continuity of instruction, it's important that we have that structure. It's important that we have times, and we've communicated that to parents. And we're required to do that as part of our NYSED plan. Students will continue to get feedback through Google. Obviously, Kami was very popular in the spring, where students were able to record their answers on their worksheet and resubmit that back through the Google platform. Just one more addition on that, and Dr. Egan will touch on this in just a minute. We are expanding our Chromebook initiative for grades 7 through 12. The middle school just finished their distribution last night, and the high school will begin theirs next week. So we started this process early, and students will have those one-to-one Chromebooks in grades 7 through 12. Monitoring of student progress, it's something that we're all concerned about, identifying learning gaps for students. We'll continue to use the STAR Renaissance assessments in math and reading. They are our universal screener, and they will be utilized in kindergarten through grade 8. We'll administer them 3 times, fall, winter, and spring, and we'll progress monitor students. We'll take a look at that data holistically, by grade level, by class, and individually to identify areas that individual students need help with. We're taking a look at our Envision Math program. There are some pre-assessments available by grade level, so we're exploring that now, and that could be another data point when students come back. Again, trying to identify the skills that they may need some more help in math and reading. We continue to use common assessments, quarterlies at the middle school, common unit exams at the high school, and that will be another way of benchmarking and finding out how we're doing holistically and right down to the individual student level. We'll use eSchool to post all of our grades and assignments. We're explaining that to parents. Keep checking the portal. You'll find assignments on there and grades to monitor how your child is doing. And really continuing with our current grading practice, as long as we remain in person, we can assess students on that hybrid model. If we are on remote for a long period of time, hopefully we're not, then we'll take a look at our grading practices if that becomes necessary. Special areas, as I mentioned, we do want to make sure those are on the schedule to avoid any misunderstanding or confusion. We want to communicate that to students and parents, especially at the elementary level. It's on the schedule. Students will engage in phys ed. They'll follow the standards. It'll all comply with New York State health and safety guidelines. And a lot of it will be independent practice of skills. There'll be some live teaching and demonstrations, and we want to encourage students to participate in these areas. Same for art and music. They'll follow all the guidelines, and where it's applicable, the teachers will actually visit the classroom. And just want to thank the people who worked on the committee to give us such guidance and input. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Colby Rooney, who will give us some more details on our students with disabilities and English language learners.
Thank you, Dr. Cardizano. Good evening, everyone. The Office of Pupil Personnel has been working very closely with our Pride Committee for both special education as well as mental health. And what we wanted to do is provide you with some updates in the area of pupil personnel, but also speak a little bit about the variation we've had in a few phases that have come along the way as a result of some of the guidance coming from the New York State Department of Education. NYSED is encouraging us, where feasible, to please try to increase the in-person special education services as well as services for our English language learners. So what we did was we looked at a two-phase system. The first phase was discussed with our Pride Committee. This is the current slide. Phase 1 will include classes where we're able to meet the CDC guidelines immediately due to the small class sizes and the limited transitions that occur throughout the school day. We actually utilized our extended school year services to provide a model for these programs come September 8th. If you look at the programs listed, we will be providing daily instruction for our special class 811s, K through 3. Both will be at the Fort Salonga Elementary School. Our special class 1511s will also be housed at Fort Salonga as well as RJO. We're also looking at our William T. Roger and Kings Park High School 1211 program. And for those of you at the high school that are familiar with our vocational program that we run in conjunction with Henry Viscardi Abilities, our students that go out to job training sites will be in daily, starting also on September 8th. Another area that we took a strong look at was with our English language learners. One of the things we wanted to do is take a look at our entering and emerging students. Because of their vast language needs, we determined that we would be bringing them in daily starting on September 8th. This would allow the students to get more instruction on site. We did discuss some of the concerns when students went remote back in March to June, with students not having the ability to be able to log on, as well as the follow through in the home environment. So this did help us make a determination that this particular population of students would definitely benefit from having daily instruction in person. As far as our phase 2, if we could just go to phase 2, the following programs we looked at also in regard to some concerns that were raised by parents, but also some of the guidance that was being provided through New York State Department of Education, especially in the area of special education. We wanted to make sure that our students are actually meeting their individualized education plans and that their goals are being met. We're still under the same guidelines as we were from March to June in making sure that our students are receiving their services, and then making sure that if there are any compensatory services required from March to June, that they are also receiving them this year. For our integrated co-taught, this becomes a little bit trickier because our class sizes really range because they're typically a general education class. One of the things we looked at doing was to try to increase the contact time at our grades K through 5. Right now, with the hybrid model, our students would be going on those AB days with a remote on the Wednesday. What we're looking to do starting on September 21st is phasing in for our grades K through 5 an additional day. It would be a third day. Now, in the event that the district was able to go to full instruction daily for grades K through 3, the students would just follow that schedule. Should we not be able to bring back our K through 3 daily, then our students would be coming in on their AB day, but we would also be working to bring them in on Wednesday. That Wednesday would be designated to provide them an opportunity to work on their IEP goals and to also receive some additional supports and services, whether they be in the area of reading support, math support, and even related services. As far as our special class 1511s, this was also another area that we wanted to take an additional look at. We met, Lori Tassi, myself, and Christina Smith have been working with all the teams that work through ESY, but we've also met together to go over the possibility of bringing these students in daily. This was a little bit trickier in the fact that a hybrid schedule allows them to follow along with their classes and their electives. By bringing in the students daily, we had to take into consideration how we would incorporate electives, also how we would address the split schedules. We were able to take a closer look at it, and it does appear to be feasible. We will be implementing that come September 21st. We have asked parents to be patient with us because it is going to require us to take a look at the additional use of instructional support staff, as well as some of our aides and classroom monitors. We will be scheduling department meetings to answer any specific program questions you have. We realize that it is very hard to conceptualize when you see it on a screen versus seeing it in person. So that is why we'll be meeting individually with each of the departments, but also specifically with each of the areas, whether it be English language learners or our special class 1511, 6 through 12, or even our special class at the grades K through 5 level. The other area we took a look at is our mental health and social well-being. I know that Ms. Tossi has worked diligently the last couple of weeks, along with Ms. Smith and our social workers, as well as our school psychologists and the Pride Committee. They've done a great deal of work on trying to acquire additional information from staff, parents, and also students regarding the mental health needs. We're looking at trying to provide additional support, whether they be through resources that are provided to staff to work with students on the areas of wearing a mask, social distancing. Some of this, which we've already implemented during the ESY, will be tailoring to meet the needs of the developmental needs of our students. We're also taking a look at how we would incorporate some of those mindfulness moments that Dr. Cardizano had reviewed over in the remote learning schedules, as well as providing just check-ins for not only our students and our families, but also our staff, as we're well aware of the fact of some of the anxiety that may come as a result of returning back to the school environment. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Egan to go over the attendance.
Much better. I was muted. I'm going to kind of be the anchor man. We're almost there. Attendance is going to be super important, as it typically would. Number one, for teaching and learning, but number two, for potential contact tracing. Should we have a case or suspected case of COVID-19, we're going to want to know who those students have come into close contact with. So that's why attendance on buses and things of that nature will be very important. So we will be taking super accurate attendance, including attendance on our buses. In-person attendance, super simple. We're going to take it as we always have. Remote attendance is going to be taken using the ClassLink dashboard. We have been instructing, and we will continue to instruct students to log into their ClassLink dashboard first, and then navigate to one of their many apps in their single sign-in dashboard, whether it be Google, Castle Learning, Discovery Education, and so on. Then teachers should see the time logged in these tools in their teacher console of ClassLink, and we should know if the student engaged or not on days where they are working remotely. So that's how we will be taking a student attendance when they're not in person in school. We're also sharing with parents, we're encouraging parents, go on to Google Classroom if you think you need to check up on your child's work, but please go directly into Google Classroom and not through ClassLink, so that they don't log student engagement time for their child. We touched on this earlier, but 7 to 12 are gonna get their own Chromebook. Middle school is distributing this week, high school is distributing next week. We've asked parents in grades K to 6 to kindly fill out this survey, either in English and Spanish, and let us know if the child does not have a dedicated device in the home. We will be pulling that data out of SurveyMonkey and getting it to the buildings and getting it to our elementary classroom teachers. And hopefully that first week of school, we will be sending devices home with children so that they do have a dedicated device at home on which to work. We also did purchase a limited number of Wi-Fi hotspots, because we do know that some of our families do not have Wi-Fi in the home, and hopefully we'll be able to supply that. We talked about our CTE students. We have about 50 of them at the high school. They will be 5 days a week at the high school. They'll go to their CTE program at BOCES in the morning. They'll come back, they'll eat lunch, and we're gonna have a place for them at the high school where they can engage and log into their devices and get some work done. I know the high school is still working on the specific plans and logistics to make sure that this happens. We know right now that fall sports are delayed until at least September 21st. We're not totally sure what's going to happen with fall sports. We'll keep our coaches informed as this evolves. We know that a couple of collegiate conferences have already thrown in the white towel, so to speak, in terms of the fall season. We're going to need to see how that evolves. We are asking, and there are a couple of exceptions like marching band who continued through the summer, but we are asking, let's wait till the 21st of September to get our clubs up and running. This way our students are just super focused on re-entering and getting through school those first 2 weeks. Unfortunately, like indoor gyms in New York State, the weight room is going to be closed until further notice. A couple of other general questions. If you work at RJO, don't worry about visitors to the museum, because that's not going to be happening anytime soon. And we are working with the town of Smithtown on a childcare option. We will be sharing that option with the community shortly. I was hoping to have some information from the town of Smithtown this afternoon, but maybe we'll get that tomorrow. And it may be useful not only for our parents, but also for some of our staff members. We're going to see how that evolves. We've shared this. It's a statement from the New York State American Academy of Pediatrics, made up of about 1,500 pediatricians in Suffolk, Nassau, Brooklyn, and Queens. They do support returning students to school, returning staff to school, but with specific things like universal mask policies, use of barriers, limiting populations, which is what a hybrid model does, hand hygiene, things of that nature, super important, and all things that we've incorporated into our plan. A couple of key questions that I ask myself daily. How on earth did we get through the Spanish flu in 1918 without remote learning? Without A day, B days, things of that nature. We did it then, and we'll get through this now. I ask myself daily, what is the risk level associated with whatever that is on that blank? If that risk level is high, my recommendation is going to be that we avoid that activity or that setting. If the risk association is low, then that is likely something that we're going to move forward with. What is the most important aspect of reopening? We like to think that it's education, but it's health. Health and safety is of the utmost importance. And I think many of you know that I have school-age children. Many of our administrators have school-age children or family members who we're very close with who are school-age. And we all use that litmus test. Would I feel comfortable putting my child in that setting, in that environment? If the answer is no, if we're not comfortable, then it's probably something that we're not looking to implement. And please know, and I've shared this with my wife and my sister, and I come from a family of educators, and I am not going to ask our staff to do anything that I would not ask my own wife or my own sister to do, or put them in an environment, put you in an environment I wouldn't be comfortable with my wife or my sister being in. And just in closing, as much as we want things to return to normal this September, we know that it's still not normal. We know that when we go outside or we go shopping and we're still 6 feet apart and wearing masks wherever we go. We want to meet the needs of our families and our employees to the greatest extent possible. You know, we do realize again that we have 2 sets of employees that work for us. We have those who never quite left and have been working since March, and those who are anxious about coming back because you haven't been at work for quite some time, and that might be causing you some anxiety. We're here to support you, and we're going to get back to work and meeting the needs of our students as best we can together as a team. And again, no one does family like we do. No one does family like Kings Park. So about an hour and a half of listening to me. We do have the ability to do a little Q&A if there are things that you want to ask. What I would ask is probably on the bottom of your screen, you might have a reactions button, and maybe there's a thumbs up, maybe there's a wave, maybe there's a raise my hand. If you hit one of those buttons, I'll kind of float around and see who might have a question, and I'll ask away. I got the first question on my screen in front of me, and the name doesn't match what I'm seeing on the screen. It says Trimblum. Let me try again. Who else has a question? Raise your hand. Give me a thumbs up. I'm searching. Sue Pagliata, what you got for me?
Hi, Dr. Egan. I'm just wondering, I don't know if you know this now. Has the CDC given districts any indication what the criteria will be to loosen restrictions? So if we're at 1% now, how low does it have to go before, they decide to loosen things up a little bit, so to speak?
Good question. So I don't know. I did have a very knowledgeable nurse in the last hour or so sent me a little bit of information on the 5%, 9%, which made a little bit more sense. Apparently 5% is an indication that we may be on the verge of an outbreak or a spike. And 9% is when you're at the point where contact tracing is no longer effective. And that's kind of where we were in March and April. So, the question would be, when do we get to the point where the state loosens the guidelines? I don't know. I hope that we continue to decrease from 1%, and that at some point the state and the CDC say, it's okay to return to school on green, or yellow, where we're back in person 5 days a week everywhere, but, still with some precautions. So, we're really going to wait on state guidance and see what we can do when we can do it. And I'll make sure to communicate that with staff as best I can. Tara, did you have a question? Tara Griffin?
Yes, I did. How are you?
Good.
I know you mentioned for transportation that we would be loading the buses from the back to the front, which I understand for contact reasons. But if I have an incoming kindergartner who needs help with the seatbelt or is nervous about coming on the bus, I can't put them all the way in the back.
I do understand. We're going to try to stick to that as best we can. That was a recommendation from the State Committee on Transportation and the Suffolk County Committee on Transportation. You know, there may be some instances where you want to deviate from that, but you know, the back to front, front to back is really to try to limit students passing each other and potentially touching each other. So, you know, great question. Follow that guidance as best you can, but know that there might be some instances where you need to use your best judgment and, you know, your experience, many years of experience as being a bus driver.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm looking around. Who else has a question? I'm looking for hands that might be raised. If I'm not seeing you, I see Frank's iPad might have a question. She's waving at me. Go ahead. Go ahead and ask.
Okay, I had to unmute. Mine follows Tara's. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, mine follows Tara's. You said we're gonna have an aide on the bus for the first, what, how long? 2 weeks?
We are definitely going to try. We've posted for those positions. I am super hopeful that that we can hire some additional driver assistants. Some folks that might look like me or some of my assistants might be helping you for the first week or two, if we can. But I'm gonna endeavor to try to get another adult that can help our drivers out for the first, hopefully for the first 2 weeks.
Okay, because there will be problems after that, after there isn't an aide on the bus with us, especially with our kindergartners mixing with the third graders and stuff like that. That's why Tara was saying we always sit our kindergartners up in the front. So what if we sat them up in the front and all of them at the windows though?
That is a possibility.
Yeah,
That is a possibility because they are tiny and clearly cannot see over those high back seats. So I think that works.
yeah, because they, you know, it always winds up being a problem if they're by a third grader or something. And then the parents, you'll have a problem with the parents also then. Because they'll be like, how come my kindergarten is all the way in the back? And you'll get a million phone calls from them, a million. You will.
Understood.
Okay. All right. That was it.
You got it. I see somebody waving at me. Go ahead, Ro.
Hi, I'm just curious about the situation with the bus aides that you were just discussing. And although I'm not a driver assistant, I was wondering, is that something that could be considered as a temporary position for some of us in case you needed a hand from some of, say, the special education aides or whoever had the time might be able to do a couple of weeks on the bus until you get everything settled, if you're, you know, but not do it as a permanent position?
Absolutely. If you reach out to Mr. Craig's office, let him know that that's work you might want to pick up, and we can certainly do that.
Okay, but we wouldn't have to be locked into it, say, for the whole year or something like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, who else has a question?
Hi, Jody.
Hi.
Hi. When my kids come in, when they're masked, I feel comfortable. However, little messy kids who eat their snacks without masks and make a gross mess, that's when I'm starting to feel nervous. Any words of advice?
Absolutely. Jody, just refresh my memory. What grade are you?
Third grade.
Third grade. Okay. So just remember that we will have Lexan barriers installed on all of those desks. And one of the reasons that we're doing that for the little ones is exactly that. We want to have a little extra protection front and back, which hopefully will not only keep everybody safe, but make you feel a little better about being in that environment. But that was one of the things we took into consideration when we looked to do the Lexan, particularly in K3. So hopefully that'll help.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. It helps a little bit.
Understood. And remember, the younger, truth be told, the younger they are, the less you really need to worry.
Well,
but I know that doesn't make you
Yeah,
feel 100%.
I disagree, because when young kids have the virus, they're often asymptomatic, so they're not taking the test. So we don't necessarily know how much they're transmitting.
Absolutely, but we do know that I'm not aware of any child care facility in our area that's had an issue with a kid under 10 years old.
Okay.
So I completely understand the anxiousness, and us being nervous. It's been where we have had issues on Long Island has been young adult bad decisions.
Yeah.
Truth be told. So, it's still going to be a little anxious. My wife's an elementary school psychologist, so I completely get it. Those first couple of days back, she's worked 10 days over the summer. She was a bit of a wreck, but we got through it. And I think once we get through the first couple of days, I think all of our anxiety levels will, they're not going to come all the way down, but we'll definitely feel a little better about things once we're up and running.
Okay, thank you.
All right. What else? Any other looming questions out there?
Dr. Egan, it's Robin. Could you hear?
Hey, Robin.
Hi, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's been on the committee. And I know this is all about safety of the students and the teachers and the staff, and I do appreciate it. But I'm speaking on behalf of the little elementary world, and I know why there's some people a little worried about that level. And what I'm seeing is that there would be a classroom teacher with the same kids in front of them constantly, but yet some of my own colleagues are going from room to room to room to room, art, music, and we're traveling into these different classrooms, and some of us are also traveling into different schools as well. So I know this is not all 100% set in stone. I would hope the committee would please look again at these teachers who are going place to place to place, and maybe make it so they're not traveling all different places if possible.
Understood, Robin.
Thank you.
One of the things we're trying to put in place as best we can, it's called cohorting, and it's keeping the students together, which is it's in both the CDC and the DOH guidelines. But I do understand what you're describing. I completely understand, and
right, I could understand those students in that same environment together, but yet somebody like me is going from that environment to the environment 2 doors down, to the environment upstairs, to the environment of Fort Salonga, and then back to the environment of RJO again. So again, I just want the committee to please understand this, and obviously it's a bunch of teachers. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And did I mention you'll have brand new bathrooms at RJO?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I saw on the plan about the taking of temperatures. Is that just on the parents' end now, or is that also going to be happening at the as well.
Corinne, do me a favor.
I'm not sure if you heard my question. I said, is the temperature taking only?
Okay, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think I understand the question. So,
Okay. Yes. I just moved closer to my router. I'm not sure if that would help.
Yeah,
my question.
It definitely did.
Okay. My question is more related to whether or not we are doing a second check at school or if it's just on the parents, because I know that all of us as elementary school teachers have all experienced the kid that by 11 o'clock has 103.5 fever or has thrown up on you or your classroom, and they say, well, my mom said that she was going to pick me up at lunchtime because she had a meeting, and they inform you that they've been sick. And I know, for those of us who are coming from homes where we have or are the primary caregiver of somebody who is a high at-risk person, it would make me feel better if we were also double checking and it wasn't just the honor system, because historically speaking, the honor system has not worked.
Understood. So what we will be doing at the schools is via the app, we will know which parents have submitted the health screening tools and which ones have not. And our nurses will be following up with those that have not submitted the health screening tool, taking temperatures and asking kids questions and calling them down to the nurse's office and so on and so forth. So that piece of it we will be following up with at the school. We will not, for example, be taking every student's temperature on the way in the door. We did look at what that might look like. And it would potentially take a school an hour to get all the kids in the building, taking everybody's temperature in the morning. And with all the devices that would require, it was a little bit of logistic and cost prohibitive. But we do have a plan with the app where we will be able to follow up with individual students that we know have not submitted the health screening tool on particular days.
Okay. What about at the classroom level? Is that something that's considered, like, could that be part of your morning routine if you wanted to do that in the event, or is that considered like, invasive, or, like to use the head thermometer in certain rooms? I'm like one of those parents who are very anxious only because of my home situation. So I just want for peace of mind to know that it's not based upon the honor system that has been, historically speaking, in our jail or in all of the years that I've been teaching.
I completely understand. The job of health is that of a health professional.
Okay.
And, taking temperature is the role of a school nurse or a physician or mom or dad. So, I would leave the temperature piece to the health professional. There are districts upstate that we're thinking about having bus drivers, pointing things at kids' heads as they're on the way up the bus in the morning. That's not the job of the bus driver either. So, I think the important thing is to leave the function of health with those that are best trained in health.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
You got it.
Dr. Egan, may I ask a question?
Of course, Jen.
Hi. In the event that someone does get sick, a student in our class, what is the plan that would happen? Does that class, now, because there are so many viruses that it could be that mimic COVID. So the parent could say, oh, it's just a cold, when in fact it's not. So that's a little concerning. And then if someone is sick in any way, what's the plan for the class or even the school?
there are some really specific guidelines that we actually just received from the Suffolk County Department of Health earlier today. It's in draft format. That will make sure we get to our schools and our nurses. But on your end, if we have a child who's not feeling well, you're going to send that child to the nurse, and the nurse is going to check that child's symptoms. If we believe that the child is symptomatic, the child will go to a separate room. It's called an isolation room. I'm sure our elementary schools will come up with a ringier name than isolation room. But they'll go to that isolation room. Mom or dad will come pick them up, and they'll need to go get tested before they can return to school. In the meantime, there's a host of notifications that we may need to do in terms of, putting various folks on alert that we had a potential case of COVID, which may very well impact each one of the students in that classroom. It could impact the whole school, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that our RED model, our remote, is ready to go and as robust as possible, because the answer may very well be, we got to go to remote instruction for 2 weeks. But that it'll depend on, and even the Suffolk County Department of Health Services guidance says, it's going to depend on the individual case. And, we'll be making calls to the Suffolk County Department of Health and asking them for their advice. It's as a former mentor used to use a phrase with me all the time, it's clear as mud. But on the classroom level, if you have a child who's not feeling well, it's just as we always been. You'll send that child down to the nurse, and the protocol will kick in.
Okay, thank you.
And it's going to become really complicated with fall allergies and a common cold, which is why the temperature becomes important. But not every child presents with a temperature, so it's complicated.
Dr. Egan, may I interject a comment at this time? Kevin
Sure.
Johnston?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to speak personally, but I think my sentiments are the same as the rest of the Board of Education, though. And I just want to say thank you to the many people that were working throughout the summer, be it the security people, the bus drivers and the aides that delivered food, the dietary people, the custodial people, goodness knows the administrative office, especially in the area of special ed. And then just the teacher input on the committee, 90 people, and we had a lot of staff members that helped out. That it didn't go unnoticed, okay? And I just want to thank everybody because now we move to right into these difficult and unprecedented times on a different level with students coming back to school. So on behalf of myself and I believe the rest of the Board of Education, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We might have time for one or two more questions. Maybe we'll call it around 9 o'clock. But anyone else that?
Dr. Egan, I have one.
Sure, Mr. Nally.
Going back to the last question, they were talking about symptoms. But what if a student tests positive in my class? Does that mean I have to quarantine at home for 14 days? Does that mean schools closed for 2 weeks? And who makes that decision?
It likely means, great question. It likely means, especially at the high school level where you're changing for classes, it likely means that would shut the school down for 2 weeks. Whose decision would it be? We'd call Suffolk County Department of Health, but likely if we had a known case in the high school, with movement, and you can't really cohort a high school, it would likely shut us down for 2 weeks. And it might be just the high school that shuts down for 2 weeks. Or, depending on you're only at the high school, Tom, if you were a teacher who traveled, it could very well shut that other building down for 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
I wish I had a better answer. So, the really good news, and I think it's good news, is we have had lots of day camps and child care facilities that have been in operation since April that have been super successful. And the places that have not been super successful were adult bad decisions and young adult bad decisions. Most of younger than any of us on this call bad decisions. So if we continue to make good decisions and the community continues to make good decisions, we're going to be in a good place come the fall. I want to believe we can do this. It's certainly an anxious time for everybody, and we'll certainly be rethinking just about every aspect of school. But I'm really hopeful we can do this and that we can do this safely.
Dr. Egan, I just have a quick question. It's Michelle Manz. In regards to the Lexan that we were talking about earlier, I know my colleagues and I in the guidance department, we were discussing, seeing our students. We all miss our students, and we want to be able to make sure we have contact with our kids. But the concern is that the offices are very small. So that 6 feet of distance just has some concerns. And I was wondering if it was possible that we could get those same Lexan barriers that you discussed that the secretaries were getting. I think that would be something that would be very useful in the guidance office so that we could service our students better.
Yeah, good point. We can certainly take a look at that, Michelle, and I thank you for asking. I'm 99% sure that we did order some extras, and we can always, our facilities department has become really good at making them fairly quickly. So if for whatever reason, we don't have one for everyone that wants one, we can make them. So we'll get it for you, all right?
Thank you. That would be great. I think that would ease the mind of a lot of people in the office.
Got it.
Dr. Egan, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. In a follow-up to Mr. Nally's question in regards to student high, if a student tests positive on the bus, what is protocol going to be for that?
You were breaking up a little bit, but I heard test positive and the bus. So I'm gonna read into that we might have had a student on a bus who
What would the
tested positive.
protocol be for that?
And certainly that might impact several schools, if not all the schools. So that would be a very bad scenario for us, because we will have had 4 cohorts of students that were on that bus that particular morning. So that would certainly be a call to Suffolk County Department of Health, and we need to dissect that a little bit. But that's one of the reasons why we've asked our drivers to take attendance every morning so that we know exactly who was on each bus. Because that scenario would be a tough one for us.
So the bus drivers are going to be taking attendance for every school every morning and every afternoon or only in the mornings for each school on their routes?
So good question. We're gonna need to know. I'll talk to Steve about that. We definitely need the morning. You know, the afternoon is an interesting thought. We'll probably need the afternoon as well, but let me connect with Mr. Lee, and we'll make sure we get that firmed up.
Okay, because that's going to put times into our routes as we're picking up, especially in the beginning of the year when we don't know every child's name at that point.
Dr. Egan, if I can interject here.
Sure.
The attendance bus report will show each stop in stop order, child's name, child's stop, grade level, even has phone numbers on it. It is a 2-week window of attendance, so we can trace back to that. What I've been doing is extensive, and this is why I feel the survey about student specific is if they're driving or they're going to do remote, that we can take them, they'll still stay in our system, but we can put them as a no ride. So they'll still stay in our system, but then that will take them out of the attendance report, right? And also for the drivers, if say there's one kid at one stop, we can eliminate that stop for the drivers to take attendance. And, you know, so that cuts down the loads that we have on the bus.
Got it.
And we can make a better judgment of who's on the bus. And then also, additionally, if they're not on the bus, for whether remote or driving, that it will shorten the time of the run, and that will give the drivers a little more time to clean the bus.
Yeah, that's excellent, Carrie. Thank you. Why don't we connect either tomorrow or Friday, and we can firm up that that survey, and I'll get that survey out next week. Okay?
Yeah, because one of the things that I did recently was, because last year we had the situation where kids were being homeschooled because of vaccinations, and that was not communicated to us in transportation. So I ran a report out of eSchool of homeschooled students and took a whole lot of kids out of our transportation. And I also, as much as our schools are pretty good about giving us deleted students, some of those go by the wayside too. So I ran a report out of eSchool for deleted students, you know, people that moved out of district.
Yeah.
So as much as possible, I'm trying to, you know, get everybody that doesn't need a bus, you know what I'm saying? So that we can actually get some better numbers. So what I did, just for Porcelanga, Parkview, and the middle school, is I took the highest load bus and took a count of A through L and N through Z, and it looked pretty good until we got to Parkview. I took my highest load bus, and it was A through L, was 30 students. Everything else kind of evened out, and I figured the lower, you know, the lower load of a bus would be probably okay. But so we are running into a little bit of a problem there. So as much information as we can get to make it accurate, and then we don't have to worry about the attendance report showing everybody that's on the bus.
Yeah, makes sense, Carrie. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I will send you the what the bus report looks like, and so you can get a better idea.
Perfect. I got one last question at the bottom right hand of my screen. Roberts,
Hi. Yeah, I was having a question about the nurses' offices. Are they going to have shields between the cots? If we have more than 3 students come in that need either icing or to rest for migraines or any other issues? Because those cots cannot be put 6 feet apart.
That's a new one. I had not heard that one yet. So thank you for pointing that out. We very well may need to get some barriers for the nurse's office. I don't know if facilities has thought that through yet, but I'll make sure to connect with them and we will see what we can do.
Yes, because the middle school and the high school, there's at least 3 cots in the room. I know the elementary schools only have 1 or 2 cots, but they're separated. So one would probably be the isolation room. But the cots are used constantly throughout the day for various reasons. And again, they're within 2 feet of each other.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
You got it. All right, everybody, it's 9:06 and I have been on Zoom since 4 o'clock this afternoon. I want to go see if my wife remembers what I look like. So I am glad that we had this time to spend together. We did briefly max out at 300. I did record the session and I will send the link out just to you so that this remains our staff session and not a public session. I'll make sure I get that out to you tomorrow. This way, if you have any members who weren't able to join, they want to hear the Q&A, they want to see the presentation, they can go ahead and do that. All right? Go have a wonderful evening. If you have any other questions, reach out to your principal, reach out to me. If it's curriculum in nature, Dr. Cardesano, Dr. Colby Rooney for PPS type issues, Mr. Craig for ADA accommodations and PPE, and enjoy the rest of the week. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Egan.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.